God. You can't have a God who knows everything and also is not compassionate.
Is that it's not an encounter with God to be punished, but it's really an encounter to be healed.
Judgment on your end, like if someone is afraid to bring up a sin or you hear a particular sin, like what's going through the
Uh-huh.
priest's mind?
Experiencing our sexuality and desires in a wholly integrated way, not to repress them, but really to direct them toward God in an integrated.
Welcome back to the Everyday Saint podcast. Today we are here with Father Bill at the St. John Paul II National Shrine, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation, especially talking about sin and sexual sin and theology of the body from a priest's perspective. Who, you hear these things in confession, you try and walk people through them,
Mhm.
and I really want to ask this first question from the perspective of someone who's struggling with sexual sin or maybe doesn't understand why it's so wrong and why the church doesn't
Mhm.
see, uh, you know, sexual intimacy outside of marriage, why
Sure.
that's not good,
Mhm.
different things like that. Because in talking with a lot of young people, it seems like it should be a good thing, right? Like there's this promise of intimacy, there's
Mhm.
a promise of connection,
Uh,
especially with any form of sexual sin. So, Father, would you mind just starting us off with if someone were to live with the perspective that these things are sin and want to be guided towards love like God wants us to love,
sure.
how will their life change?
Yeah, that's a great question, Even. It's good to be here today. And one thing as a priest, I really love to help encourage people with is just the truth that the body is really a holy part of who we are. As a person, we're a combination, as you know, of soul and body. The body is really a positive part of who we are. And actually, St. John Paul II was really a big help in really just giving us a lot of wisdom and insight about the goodness of the body, especially in two sources of writings that he had: the theology of the body, but also love and responsibility, which was an early work that he wrote even before he was Pope, about the goodness of the body and the goodness of desires. And one of the great insights he had was, again, that the human person as a whole is meant to be holy, soul and body. And he also had this concept of the language of the body, that the body, including in intimate relationships, is really meant to communicate in authentic language, and that language of total self gift. That the body really has a great ability and power to communicate total self gift that really makes sense authentically only in certain holy kinds of interactions, committed marital relationships, and just also as we'll talk about later about chastity, being able to relate to others in a wholly authentic way when one's dating, or just interacting with people in different kinds of relationships and friendships too. But that sense that the body is really meant to be holy, and that really is a key aspect of our Christian faith. We push back against the philosophy of what's called dualism, which mainly says that only the soul is good, but the body is less significant or incidental. It doesn't really matter all that much. But we as Christians have always believed in the goodness of the whole person's soul and body. That the body is really called to holiness, called to goodness. And really, that's rooted in our faith in two things. One is that God created the whole universe, including the earth, including its material matter, including the human flesh, as good. You go back to the book of Genesis, and he always says, after each of the days of creation, this is good. And when he created a human person, he said, this is very good. Another thing too is that God came into our world in a body through the person of Jesus Christ. Jesus was not around us as a ghost. He was around us in a body, as a whole person, body and soul. So that tells us there too that the body is meant to be holy and called to be holy. And so that's kind of the vision, the goal that we have, is to grow into the deeper holiness of the body that we're meant to have. And as you alluded to, that can take some struggle, that can involve some difficulties, especially with the temptations that we do experience, especially in the realm of sexuality, which obviously has to do with the body. So I want to talk a little bit more today about, if somebody is trying to strive for holiness of the body and becoming more appreciative of the significance of the body, but still grappling with some of the struggles and temptations of the body, how they can bring that to God and bring that
Mhm.
also to the sacraments, including confession, in a way that they don't feel shameful in doing so. That's kind of what I want to
Right.
talk about more today.
Oh, definitely, especially because there is so much shame surrounding this topic, and I think
Mhm.
sometimes when we think of these sins, as you were just saying, it's not to focus so much on the negative and the badness
Sure.
of these things, because in the right context, some of these desires are good things,
Oh,
right? Like
sure.
in
Yeah.
marriage and
Mhm.
the way that God designed it to be, but
Yeah.
because of some sacrifices that we take in order to align ourselves with the love of God. Like there's so much freedom offered in that.
Sure.
Even though it might seem difficult or countercultural
Uh,
in the time, it's actually not a view of like, oh, these are a bunch of no's, but it's really something of recognizing the goodness of who
mhm.
we are as people and the
Sure.
goodness of also the person in front of us,
Yeah. Mhm.
and recognizing how much they deserve to be honored and loved authentically and
Yeah.
with respect.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, what the focus needs to be on when we think of these sins a lot
Mhm.
of the time is like, don't think of these things as like your body is bad, right? Don't
Sure.
don't think of
Uh-huh.
yourself as bad, or your identity and degrade yourself. It's
Uh-huh.
really just something so good that God has given us boundaries so that we can best honor and respect it.
Sure. Yeah. And that's a great point. And one of the things I like to encourage people with is not to see our moral teachings, especially on the body, as a set of some kind of rules and regulations that we got to follow, or else the Pope will be mad and Father be mad and will be punished. But really, as a vision of the greatness we're called to, we're called to greatness, including the body, and um, and that really is something that I think is very encouraging, that we're called to greatness and using our free will to desire the greatness of our bodies and desires. As we'll talk more about later, our desires are not inherently bad. They're placed in us by God to be a part of who we are, to desire the good and the holy, and to desire true happiness authentically
Mhm.
in this world as a preparation for deeper union with God in the next world, in heaven. And one of the great things about our faith is the reality that growth is possible, that redemption is possible. That's a great thing about Jesus. He came into the world not to shame us or to judge us harshly, but to give us the graces we need to grow and to go deeper in that redemption of the body. Pope John Paul II taught a lot about the redemption of the body, that even if
Mhm.
we struggle in our desires and sexual challenges, that redemption is possible, growth is possible if we come to Jesus in great honesty and say, Jesus, I can't do this myself. I need your help. He's there to give us the help we need to grow and to experience redemption. Or another way to say redemption is kind of healing or greater integration of our bodies. And um, one of the great things that Jesus said in the Gospels is he came not to save the righteous, but he came to save sinners or those who are sick. The sick are the ones who need a physician, and he is our divine physician. And in the scriptures, he always meets people with great mercy and compassion who are really struggling but want to grow in holiness. I think that's a great encouraging thing, too. And Pope Francis, our most recent pope, um, he had a wonderful phrase when he first became pope about the church as a field hospital for sinners. The fact that, to be part of the church doesn't mean that you have to pretend that you're already perfectly polished and holy and with a halo on top and
Mhm.
everything, but that being part of the church is part of the being a body of disciples that want to continue to grow. We realize we're not there. We want to continue to grow. In fact, at the very beginning of every Mass, if you notice at the beginning of Mass, there's always a penitential act that we do where right from the get go at Mass, we tell the Lord, yeah, we are sinful. We are struggling. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. And we say that so that we could admit to the Lord, yeah, we need the Lord's help. And throughout Mass, we experience the Lord's help to help us to grow, to go deeper in the path of redemption, and to really see our being part of the church as again, part of that field hospital for sinners, to experience the Lord as our divine physician to help us to heal and to grow.
Yes, definitely. And I really love that point, especially when it comes to redemption and
Uh,
both. In the Mass, we have this penitential act, and then we have the greatest act of love
Mhm.
continued out in the
Yeah,
Eucharist at Mass. So it's like
sure.
we have everything we need from Jesus and everything we could ask for
Yeah.
right in this hour, right?
Sure, exactly.
That we
Yeah,
can experience every single day if we
yeah.
wanted to. And when I kind of think, especially about this sin, and I'm personally someone who doesn't fall so much on the scrupulous side, but on the side of like, oh, maybe I'm just like
Mhm.
not going to think about the
Uh-huh.
things that I'm struggling with or
Yeah.
struggle to bring them to God. When someone is struggling, especially with sexual sins, what advice do
Mhm.
you have for them to really bring this to God?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of people think that, well, I'm struggling with sin, particularly sexual sin, which is inherently, very personal and very sensitive. And especially when we think of God as the Almighty, all holy God. And so some people are tempted to think, well, I can't possibly bring this part of my life to God in prayer. I got to hide this from God. And I really encourage as a priest for people to really be totally open and honest with God about the struggles we go through. And some of the encouraging things I like to help people with is knowing that, first of all, God is your creator. He created
Mhm.
you. So He knows you thoroughly, including your sexual nature. You can't hide anything from God anyway. And one of the great bits of the Bible that I love to ponder is Psalm 139, a beautiful psalm just about God knowing you so thoroughly, even from the moment of your conception in the womb. God knew you so deeply, and God has been with you at every moment in the time you grew up and through adolescence, and including that, and knows everything about you in terms of sexuality as well and your desires. So there's nothing really that we can hide from God, nor should we, because God, again, is one who loves us so thoroughly and so deeply. And He's going to want to do anything He can to shower graces upon us to help us to keep growing and keep becoming more and more the holy creations that He wants us to be. And again, another really encouraging thing is the fact that Jesus, the Son of God, came into the world in a body and He lived in this world. Uh, and Even though He was sinless, obviously, Jesus committed no sin, He still would have gone through various struggles and temptations. We see that in a really powerful way right after His baptism out in the desert. He was tempted in many different ways by the evil one. And so we see there that even Jesus himself, as the Son of God, went through different struggles and temptations, and he had to totally rely on the providence and help of his Father in heaven. Even on the cross, Jesus, in the deepest, darkest struggles of his humanity, really had to call out upon his Father, my God." He even gives a hint of the depths of his struggles. Why have you forsaken me? Of course, he knew that God the Father would never forsake him. But that gives you a sense of the depths of struggle and total reliance on the Father that Jesus himself actually had to have. And so, yeah, Jesus, God, is really going to be very compassionate upon us no matter what struggles we go through, including sexual struggles too. So, yeah, I always encourage people never to feel like they got to hide things from God. God is a great, compassionate creator and one who's really, through Jesus, his son especially, is going to want to show great mercy upon us.
Definitely. And I think it's fitting like you can't when I think of the character of God, you can't have a God who knows everything and also is not compassionate,
Sure.
right? Like
Yeah. Uh-huh.
if he knows everything,
Uh-huh.
he sees our struggle, he sees our desires and hopefully a desire for him. I mean, we
Yeah.
all are
Hmm.
naturally inclined for that desire to
Yeah.
love him back, whether we
Yeah.
realize it or
Hmm.
not. So
Sure.
that goes a long way, especially when overcoming these struggles.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
I would love to know your advice, Father, for someone who has fallen into sexual sin in the past,
Hmm.
regrets it. What do they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you hinted at really a key part of John Paul's theology of the body, that sense of having desires by themselves is not a bad thing. We're made with desires. God created us as humans to know, to love, and want to serve God, and as total persons, want to give oneself as a total gift to God. And that's really the larger picture context of our desires, really seeing them as ultimately a desire for union with God, and even and sexuality itself is meant to be a sign of a deeper longing and for a union with God. And so, not to be ashamed of having desires, because again, they're placed in God for a reason. And but when we do struggle with the power of the desires we do have, and we struggle with them, not to feel ashamed to bring them to God. And one of the great tools we have as Catholics, as you know, is the sacrament of reconciliation, also known as confession or penance. And that's a great opportunity to bring to God the struggles we're having with any area of our life, but including sexuality, and to really see that as an encounter with the love and mercy of Jesus. Confession is really, as with any sacrament, really is an encounter with Jesus in the most powerful way possible on this side of heaven. It's really a a chance to come to Jesus, much the same way that many people came to him in the Bible that we read about, who were struggling in different ways, and they came to him and they experienced great healing and great help from Jesus, and great compassion and mercy from him as well. So I really encourage people that are going through sexual struggles, um, to recognize that, yep, I'm going through a struggle, and to be honest about that, but B, also to bring that to God, not only in our personal daily prayer, but also to the encounter of the sacrament of reconciliation. So,
Hmm. Yes, definitely. And you shared a little bit about confession, but what do you think it is about the sacrament of reconciliation that will really help someone especially when it comes to sexual sin, especially
sure.
with considering the shame that they might be
Yeah.
experiencing,
Uh-huh.
confessing that to another person, especially a
Sure.
priest
Yeah.
that maybe they
Uh-huh.
know well, maybe they don't know them
Sure.
very well.
Yeah.
What is it about the sacrament of reconciliation that's really going to help them?
Yeah, it's a really powerful sacrament. And one of the things I like to help people to really see about the sacrament is that it's not an encounter with God to be punished, but it's really an encounter to be healed. In fact, when I talk to students in schools about the sacrament of reconciliation, I use the image sometimes of the difference between going to the principal's office, and I always ask kids, is it always a good thing to go to the principal's office to be sent there? And of course, they always say no, and so because often going to the principal's office means you'll get punished and your hands slapped and notes sent home to mom and dad and things like that and get punished. But what I compare the sacrament of reconciliation to is going to a doctor's office, because when you go to a doctor, you go there in order to be honest about what it is that's ailing you. But then the doctor's going to want to do everything he or she can to heal you and to get you better, to get you whole again. And so yeah, it's kind of a encounter with the doctor. In fact, we call Jesus the divine physician, because he wants to heal us from whatever is ailing us, including our most intimate struggles, including sexual sins and sexual temptations. One of the things I like to really encourage people to see the sacrament of reconciliation as is really an encounter with Jesus, not so much as, admitting sensitive struggles to another human person, even though you have a priest there. Really, what the priest is there for is to be like a window to Jesus. That's really what a sacrament is. A sacrament is, any of the sacraments makes really present to us the person of Jesus. Um, and Jesus set up this wonderful sacrament to involve a priest, really as a way to be able to, in this world, have almost like a physical way to be able to talk to Jesus himself. In fact, it comes to John chapter 20, verse 21. In fact, I'll even just read it out for the benefit of our listeners.
Mhm.
Jesus, this is after his resurrection, he says, Jesus to his apostles, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." And when he had said this, he breathed on the apostles and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. Whose sins you forgive are forgiven them, and whose sins you retain are retained." But the this really a beautiful way that Jesus, right before he ascended up into heaven, really devised this mechanism by which we can actually still physically be able to encounter Jesus here on this earth. So really, not to be afraid to bring up a sensitive sexual sin to a priest in confession, because really what a person is doing is actually through the priest communicating with Jesus himself. And of course, obviously, it goes without saying a priest can never divulge anything that's said in confession, and
Mhm,
so it's kept very secret. And so I can't possibly ever tell anybody about what a sin is that was confessed, because the key thing, really, again, is that a person is really encountering Jesus the same way that the people in the Gospels encounter Jesus who were struggling and
mhm.
experience His love and peace and forgiveness. So,
Definitely. But a bit of a funny anecdote on a serious topic. I recently was at my home parish,
uh huh.
or a parish nearby, I suppose. And it was just a daily mass. It was a school mass. And it was the last day of school for the kids, but
Uh huh.
also the last day before this priest was going to get sent to another location.
Uh huh.
And so the kids all wrote the priest different letters of like, thank you. And,
Well,
they're
sure.
in elementary
Uh
school.
huh.
But they read out a couple of them, and one of them made me laugh so hard because the child wrote something like, "Oh, thank you, Father, for such and such, and also thank you for never telling anyone my sins."
Okay. That's right, yep. That's right,
And
yep,
it made everyone chuckle a little bit
yeah,
because it's like, "Well, he's
yeah.
really not supposed to."
That's right. And actually, as a word of encouragement, and I've heard other priests tell me this too, that actually most priests, including myself, really forget most of the confessions that are told us anyway, because we hear so many confessions, in the course of a week or month or
Mhm,
year, that it's impossible for us to remember every confession that's made. And in fact, most confessionals, as you know, are designed in such a way where you can either confess face to face with the priest or behind a screen to where the priest does not see who it is anyway. So, but again, the key point is that you're really encountering Jesus and really asking Him for help and support and forgiveness for the struggles we go through.
right,
So,
definitely. I'm curious from a priest perspective. Is there any ever moments of judgment on your end? Like, if someone is afraid to bring up a sin or you hear a particular sin, like, what's going through the
uh
priest's mind?
that's a great question, and I like to share with people, especially when I'm preparing people for confession, whether it be second graders or also OCIA candidates for coming into the Catholic Church. One thing I like to emphasize is that when I do have people confess sins, no matter what the sin is, but also including sexual sins. One thing that really goes through my mind is the fact that I'm really impressed with how the person really is serious about their faith, serious enough that they recognize, yep, this is a struggle I'm going through, and I need to bring this to God, and I want to push back against this struggle. It really impresses me because it shows me that the person is really serious about what we call the spiritual battle, really wanted to take up the spiritual battle against the evil one, and that takes a lot of courage, a lot of commitment to do that. So when somebody confesses a sin, I never had the reaction of, well, this person is really weird or psycho or
Yeah.
strange, and this is the dumbest sin I've ever heard. And how could this person ever have sinned that way? No, that's never my reaction. My reaction is always, wow, I'm really impressed with this person, how this person really wants to attack this sin head on and take up this battle head on with the help of Jesus. And so I'm really always very impressed with that. And especially when I encounter teenagers that are in confession and really bringing up a lot of difficult sins, or young adults too. It really shows me how serious they really are about pushing back against these things and just taking up the spiritual battle. So I always think of these people in very, very positive terms, and really commending them for just their bravery with that. In fact, in the actual confession itself, usually, as you know, after a person has confessed their sins, the priest can then give some, words of counsel and advice. And I always make the effort to really commend the person for bringing up especially very difficult sins, and to really encourage them that what they've done is something that is really brave and courageous, and I really commend them for that. And to praise, I praise God for really their wanting to be so honest with God, and really wanting to take up that battle to go deeper in holiness. So yeah, I always really commend such people for just being really honest and authentic about their spiritual life. So,
Definitely.
yeah.
And Father, sometimes people can feel very hopeless when they keep bringing
Mhm.
up the same sins
Yeah.
to the priest.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for someone when it sometimes it doesn't feel like confession is enough, like they just
Sure.
can't overcome this sin?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get a lot of people that do come frustrated because, gosh, Father, I'm confessing the same sins again and again, and I really encourage people with that because one of the things that saints often talk about in the spiritual life is the fact that we are in a spiritual battle with the evil one, um, and especially the whole area of sexuality. Saint John Paul really said a lot about the fact that the whole area of sexuality is such a positive but powerful part of what it means to be human. Is powerful because it really has a lot of deep meaning in terms of connecting us with things of heaven, that sense of total self-gift. The whole sexual realm was meant to be an image of the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, total self-gift among the persons of the Trinity. So sexuality and the desires that come with it are meant to be a powerful sign of nothing less than things of God, things of heaven. So it's natural that the evil one is going to want to try to do everything Satan can to try to attack those kinds of things. So it's not surprising that often we do find ourselves in kind of long, drawn out battles over the reclaiming that territory of our sexuality and desires. So not to lose hope, because there is the fact that sexuality is such a powerful part of who we are, and actually, we're given some really helpful words of encouragement. I just want to share with our listeners. Um, some helpful words of encouragement from a couple of sources. One is from the Catechism itself, under the section on chastity, and just in brief, what chastity is really just in essence just simply experiencing our sexuality and desires in a wholly integrated way, not to repress them, but really to direct them toward God in an integrated, holy way, to relate to myself and others in a authentic, holy way. That's really simply what chastity is. And the Catechism shares that self mastery is a long and exacting work. One can never consider it acquired once and for all. It presupposes renewed effort at all stages in life, and that effort required can be more intense in certain periods, such as adolescence. So, again, it just encourages us that, trying to grow in sexual chastity and holiness is something that, for most people, is going to be an ongoing. Growth process, and not to be discouraged by that process. Pope Benedict actually really shared some encouraging words. He said, "We must not be discouraged by the difficulty or the obstacles that come from sin. In this regard, we must not forget that the dynamism of desire is always open to redemption." So, again, desire is a good thing, open to redemption. And he goes on to say the pilgrimage of Eros, and in this sense, he's talking about good, healthy Eros, that desire to want to receive intimacy from another, especially from God. That pilgrimage of Eros is not then about suffocating the longing that dwells in the heart of man, but about freeing it so that it can reach its true height. So again, he talks about this pilgrimage of Eros. It's a journey. It's something that may take some time to fully recover, to fully live the full meaning of desires and sexuality and eros, but not to be discouraged if it does become kind of a journey of redemption and a journey of growth. So those are just some bits I wanted to share with our listeners about not to be discouraged if you feel as if you're kind of dealing with the same kinds of sins again and again, because really by coming back to confession again and again, you're experiencing more and more of the help and support of Jesus, who wants to be with you in the long haul to keep going deeper in that path of holiness and redemption. So,
Definitely. And something I've been thinking about, and I want to know your thoughts on. Would you say that sexual sin in particular is uh, both a sin, but also a form of an addiction as well. Because I know, when
Mhm.
you're intimate or even people who struggle with pornography,
Sure.
it seems as though because of the chemicals that are released in the mind,
Yeah.
sometimes it can be also an addiction on top
Mhm.
of also being a sin.
Yeah,
Do you
that's a good
agree?
point. Yeah, that's a good point. Because of the powers and the emotions that come with sexuality and desires, there is oftentimes people do find themselves to be addicted in different ways, especially with pornography. Because, as you say, there are scientific studies have been shown that the use of pornography does release different chemicals in the brain, very similar to other kinds of substances that people can get addicted to where there can actually be a real actual addiction developed. And so, in those situations, I really recommend that people not only avail themselves of the sacrament of reconciliation, again, even if it requires multiple times to do that, but also to avail themselves of various therapies and support that can really help them to kind of break free of that kind of addiction. To look at, explore further the deeper roots of that addiction. Why are they turning to the pornography? Are there deeper wounds that need to be healed? Are there deeper things going on within the soul that are not being addressed adequately? What are the deeper things that need to be addressed that can be really unpacked through really good Christian Catholic counseling and therapies and things like that? There's also really good support groups out there, confidential support groups for a pornography addiction as well, and the different dioceses have. So yeah, that's something to really consider as well. Not only the spiritual healing, but also the therapeutic healing that can be made available to people that are dealing with the different psychological or emotional addictions that can come from sexual activities. So,
Yes. And
yeah.
when you're struggling with these sins, how do you know that you're healed from it?
Uh huh.
Because it seems like
Uh,
sometimes it seems like such a
mm,
big ask to like
sure.
be healed.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I guess, how do you know that you're healed and also take confidence that God has healed you?
Yeah, that's a great question. How do you know we got to the point where you are healed? And in one sense, really, the growth of chastity is really a lifelong process. So one can say that, well, it's always going to be a lifelong process that I want to grow deeper and deeper in purity and chastity, being able to look upon others in holiness. On the other hand, too, one hopes to get to the point with God's grace, to get into the point of being able to experience one's desires in a way that is not automatically going to result in lustful reactions. And what lust really is simply a matter of being the opposite of true love. What true love is wanting to give oneself to another or respect somebody else as a person. What lust is, in essence, is really looking upon somebody else as an object. Okay, I'm looking at somebody else really not as a person created by God, but as an object to be used for my own gratification. And so, if we get to the point where we can look at somebody say, for example, of the opposite sex as that is quite beautiful, and I can be able to look upon that person without automatically having thoughts of lust, but being able to respect that person. Oh yeah, that's a person as a creation of God. That might be an indication that maybe I have made some growth in my spiritual life, and maybe if I've been going through some struggles, then maybe I'm kind of going deeper in some healing in that sense. That's one thing I really encourage people to do that have been going through some struggles with sexual sins, especially lust after the opposite sex, is being able to look upon the opposite sex and recognizing that beauty that you're noticing as a reflection of God's beauty. So, taking that moment of recognizing somebody's beauty as not an opportunity for lust, but really as an opportunity for praising God for that beauty that I recognize, because that beauty is a sign of divine beauty. All the beauty of the universe and the world around us is a reflection of God as the good, the true, and the beautiful. God is beautiful, being one of the attributes of God, and so that would be another sign of further healing, is being able to look upon somebody's beauty not as a lustful moment, but really as a moment of praise to God for that beauty. So those are some indications. to consider to kind of see whether or not I'm really making progress in the spiritual life. But of course, even if we are making some progress in the spiritual life with regards to sexuality and being able to be chaste in our interactions with others, is we always have to be careful that the evil one is always still going to be lurking there, wanting to try to trip us up, and so we always have to be on the lookout that, yep, I got to maintain my pursuit of chastity. I had to maintain my desire for holiness with God's grace. So it's not the kind of thing where, okay, I'm done with that. I can forget
Mhm.
chastity now and move on. But it's always an ongoing asking for the Lord's help for growing deeper in that path of growth and redemption. So
Right, because it is a virtue too, like
mhm.
chastity is a
Sure. Uh-huh.
virtue,
Yeah.
like anything else that we want to keep growing and
Sure. Yeah.
working towards and understanding more fully.
Yeah.
And as we wrap up here, Father, I would love to hear just any last bits of advice that you have as a priest who,
Uh-huh.
is able to walk with a lot of people in a very special way. What last pieces of advice do you have for our
Yeah, I'd say a,
listeners?
a couple things. One is to have courage that you're not alone with the sexual struggles you're going through. Even many of the saints experience sexual
Mhm.
struggles, and that's something that surprises a lot of people. That, oh, well, saints are always holy people. Well, no, they were real people like you and me that lived in this world, and they became saints not because they never dealt with struggles. They all had struggles, but they opened themselves up entirely to God's redemption and power in their lives, and two saints in particular, for those who may be struggling with sexual kinds of temptations, to really go deeper in learning more about is one is St. Augustine. He's quite well known for his struggles early in life with chastity and being lustful. In fact, he got so involved with some of the uh, lifestyles going on in the cities of his time in North Africa back in the fourth century that he even fathered a child out of wedlock at 16 years old. And but then he realized how empty he felt. And he later wrote about this emptiness, this restlessness within him. And he recognized that it was really God that was going to be the one to fill that desire that he really had. So one day he had kind of a powerful conversion moment at his home one day and just decided he had to give his life over to God entirely. So St. Augustine is somebody I really encourage people to really read more about. He wrote a very famous book called The Confessions of St. Augustine that I really encourage listeners to ponder in these about these things. The other saint is Saint Francis of Assisi, who
Mm.
admits that he struggled with different temptations against chastity, and it's been written that he would actually, when he found himself really tempted, he would throw himself into snow or into thorn bushes. And so I'll leave it to our listeners to decide whether that would be helpful techniques for them. But the point being there is that he struggled with sexual kinds of temptations, so he really had to rely totally on God's help for just growing in that whole area. But one last thing I just want to share is Pope John Paul II really just has so much powerful things to say. And being chaplain here at the Shrine of St. John Paul, I really want to plug him. And again, it's Theology of the Body. And in that Theology of the Body, he really talks about again, this journey of rediscovering what he calls the spousal meaning of the body, the sense of total self gift, and recovering what he talks about the erotic or the eros, in other words, that desire to receive intimacy in the holy way from another. And he has a really powerful definition of eros. He says the eros is the upward impulse of the human spirit toward what is true, good, and beautiful. So again, our desires are meant to be a good thing to draw us closer to God, who is the true, the good, and the beautiful. And eros is meant to be a positive part of that. And so he's really great encouragement that Jesus is not there to accuse us, but to call us to greatness. He makes a big point of that in his Theology of the Body. He's not there to accuse us, but he's there to call us to a deeper experience of love. So, yeah, really, with the help of the saints, including St. John Paul, I really encourage our listeners just to really take heart and just going deeper in the challenge of holiness and not to be afraid to bring their struggles to God, and especially in the great sacrament of
Mhm.
reconciliation.
Right, which
So,
really forces us to confront that struggle and want to overcome
yeah.
it, which it's always helpful when we do that in the context of doing it with God.
Exactly.
Yes.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it's been so wonderful to talk with you today, Father. Thank you for sharing all of your insights. And I really hope that people are able to take this and hopefully encourages them to go to confession, whether they went last week or it's been a while,
Sure. Yes.
to always go and know that God's mercies are new every morning.
Yes.
So thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, thank you, Eve. Thank you.
Yes.